All right. So welcome back for our final session today. Very excited to have David Blend with us. David is the author of this best-selling book, Testing Business Ideas, which I think is the third book in the Strategizer series. After Value Proposition Design, Business Model Generation came this one, and then they also had the Invincible Company. David is also one of many people associated with Strategizer who have already spoken at Agile 100. We're super excited to have you with us, David. And David is going to present in a different way than everybody else. He's going to invite all of you to a mural board. So please join that board once David posts the link. David, handing over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. No, just happy to help out. We had a, nice holiday out here in California yesterday and Thanksgiving and kind of all, I'm not in a food coma, so that's good. So yeah, I just wanted to share some stuff with you all today, and we'll make it a little interactive at the end. But I just kind of wanted to share my thinking behind why we wrote the book and also how I use it with my teams. And so really, this is all about, just helping you kind of a lot with your discovery, I would say, if you're running Agile and you're doing dual track, discovery, delivery. A lot of these methods tend to help out with the discovery side of things. A little bit about myself. I'm based out here in Northern California. I kind of grew up in startups. The first startup I joined in the dot-com bubble, my introduction to Agile there, this was around 2000, 99, 2000. Our CTO at the time said, "We're Agile." And that was my training. So I really had no idea what it meant. We were a fintech startup too. So like a failed sprint for us meant literally closing up the company because we would probably lose money. And I learned a lot of bad habits, I have to say. Like I was introduced to XP there. I was introduced to Scrum there. I was introduced a little bit to Kanban, but not much. And then later on in my career, I was like, I should probably dig in and find out, what this is all about, because I don't think that training was adequate. And I kind of went all in on the Agile community. So, I've spoken at Agile, the big Agile conference, I think since 2010 on, I think almost every year. And just really try to be part of the community and really learn this stuff. So a lot of this is born out of my need. The book ended up being around testing ideas, but it's because I kept working with teams where we used Agile and then we just iteratively delivered things nobody cared about. So that was inherently frustrating for me. And I was like, there's got to be some more stuff we could do as far as discovery goes. So that's kind of brief my background. Now I work with startups, but I also work with a lot of corporations around the world on how to do iterative discovery, essentially. So we're going to be using Mural today. And I'm going to hide this section for you. So I'm going to walk through this section with you all. And then afterwards, we'll do some exercises together. And then you all can share out with me if you so choose. So let me kind of zoom in here and I'll start here and sketch some stuff out for you all. So one of the big things we were doing even before the book is kind of layering in this idea of design thinking on top of the business model canvas. So my co-author, Alexander Osterwalder, created this business model canvas about 10 years ago. I think the book came out about 10 years ago this year. And it's been used all around the world. And a lot of my teams use it to frame, even in Agile implementations, they'll use it to kind of frame big initiatives. And in it, we started realizing people still have a hard time with the actual tool with focus. And so we started kind of pulling in these kind of themes from design thinking, like desirability. Do they want this? Is there a market need? You think about that as a user. Has anyone talked to that user? Do we know that user exists? Is it not just some random thing that got dropped in our backlog? Is it viable? And so viability is usually around kind of cost and revenue. It doesn't always have to be transactional. It could be some kind of KPI you're moving within the company. Like a lot of my work with Adobe, like we would help launch them. They would launch mobile apps that would be free, but then you'd want to be Creative Cloud subscribers. So even though the app was free, we would model it out to make sure that people were converting over to Creative Cloud, which is, their kind of cash cow. So viability can mean a lot, but it's basically, should you be working on this is the question. And then feasibility, which is a lot of can you. And I think in Agile, we focus a lot on technical feasibility, which is amazing. I'm so glad we do that. I feel like it's still better than where we were before in software development, because we can use, extreme programming, we can do a slice, we can do a spike, we can essentially see if we can deliver the thing iteratively, but also be mindful of just beyond technical feasibility. So things like governance, things like regulations. I work with a lot of healthcare industry, and even though it technically works, if it violates, patient privacy laws, then you're still not going to be able to make it feasible to actually execute. And so I think one of the mistakes people make when they're using a tool like this, and this is one of the foundational tools in the book that we're extending upon from the previous two books, is the order. And so I think a lot of people, when they use this, they start left to right. Maybe it's like a very Western thing out here in the States, but I rarely ever start that way. So I tend to start sort of here in the middle, usually, like what is the value proposition? So yeah, value proposition is more like, what is the outcome of the product or the initiative you have? It's not necessarily the thing itself, it's the benefit of it. And then who are your customer segments? And so think about those epics you're working on, or I use it as a user format because not everybody actually is constrained by that format, but it's a good place to start. But think about who they are. Who are you targeting? Who do you even know if they need this thing that you're about to deliver to them? And then how do you reach them? And basically, how do you deliver? So channels are a lot about acquisition channels and distribution channels. So if I'm working with, Agile teams inside like travel companies, we'll think about, okay, do we deliver this through the through the web? Do we do it through our customer care team? Like, how do we actually deliver this value to our customers? And then what's your relationship to them? And this is probably the hardest one to figure out, because it's sort of like, what's the nature of that relationship, that bi-directional relationship you have with customers? Is it a one-time thing? Is it an occurring, subscription type thing? And then how do you make money, or how do you have that impact? So you'll notice, if you think from a risk perspective, a lot of your risk is almost like contained within desirability at the beginning. Any new initiative, I tend to focus on what we're offering, who we're focused on, how do we get to them, what's the relationship, and then I start talking about, can we actually move the needle on some kind of meaningful KPI. And then on the backstage, what are the activities? So think verbs. What are the activities we need to be doing? What are the resources? So what are the nouns, either digital or physical? And then what does that cost? And then finally, who do we partner with? And this is the flow I use probably 9 times out of 10. And it doesn't mean you can't start somewhere else. But when I first introduced this to Toyota, I worked with Toyota for a while, which is surreal in its own experience, almost like the grandfathers of lean. And I'm there teaching lean startup. But they said, this is like a bento box. And I was like, yeah, it kind of is like a bento box. You just choose kind of where to start. It's really interesting. But I had the pleasure of spending a week with Alex in Switzerland before we ever wrote the book. And I was like always wondering the backstory of how he created this tool. And I realized it's more like a systems thinking diagram. If you look at the early stage, kind of like white paper from Henry Chesbrough or anything, you'll notice it doesn't even look like a canvas. It's describing a flow. So like, here's the flow of your value prop to your customer segment. Here's the flow, the bi-directional flow from your customer and your value prop, this relationship, bi-directional feedback. Here's how you generate revenue, usually from your customer segments. You get your costs from looking at your activities, so the big verbs you need to be doing, and the nouns, the physical or digital. You can derive your costs from there. Oh, by the way, your cost should be less than your revenue if possible, and those are impacted. And then when you partner with somebody, they're bringing usually an activity or a resource that helps you create your value proposition. And so if you look at some of the early work, there's totally a flow to it. And I thought, okay, so if I can help people understand the flow, and I help my teams understand the flow, and they understand what kinds of risk, then what? Because quite honestly, a lot of teams I worked with, they knew how to do maybe interviews and surveys, but that was about it. And so basically what we've been working on with teams is like, what does the flow look like? So I'll kind of start over here with you all. And so basically, once you sketch out your strategy, right, your model, then you start writing down, okay, so what are all these assumptions? What are we assuming to be true about this, that if proven wrong could cause us to fail? And so what I typically do, well, before pandemic, I would do this in person. Now I use tools like this, like Mural, to have teams literally just write these down. And we tend to use this format, at least a format that I like. It starts with, we believe that. Okay. And so one of the reasons I like that format is because you're opening yourself up to, it's a belief. It's a belief that we probably need to go test, because if it's not true, if it's not true about our customer, or about our pricing, or about our ability to execute, like, we could be in big trouble. So first, after we get the teams to kind of sketch those out and write those down, then we tend to kind of move over to, all right, so how do we focus? Which one should we go test? And so this was another challenge I kept running into with teams, because they weren't really sure. They would just stack rank. And I vividly remember a whiteboarding session with Alex Osterwalder and myself at Stanford University. And I was showing him this 2x2. I said, look, this 2x2 works. It's a great way to start organizing your thoughts. And it took a lot of convincing. It's not easy to convince Alex of using tools. And it wasn't until he facilitated it once and he said, oh, that actually is really useful. And so, I call it, I have a name for it, which I call assumptions mapping. There's a bunch of different 2x2s out there. I first learned this from Jeff Gothelf and Josh Seiden, who wrote Lean UX back in my days at Neo. And I started using this 2x2 from Lean UX. And then I realized my teams are still stuck. Like, they don't know how to map this. They don't know what the themes are. So I started bringing these themes from design thinking over, right? So these desirability stuff that we write down in orange, the should we kind of questions, the viability in green, which are more the desirability being do they, the viability, the green ones being should we, and then the feasibility ones, the blue ones being can we. And so once you start bringing these over and you say, okay, how important is this for us to be successful? We wrote this belief down. How important is it for us to be successful, needing it to be true? And then it's, well, do we have evidence or no evidence? And there's an interesting backstory behind this as well, because when I first started doing this, and if you look online, if you just Google assumptions mapping, you'll see I started with known and unknown. And I thought, oh, that's enough. We're good. Known and unknown. And sure enough, I'd get really either just really strong personalities in the room with executives of corporations, or I'd get like these startup founders who are their reality distortion field was very strong. And they would put a sticky down and I would say, why did you put it there? And then they would say, well, I just know. I was like, okay, that's not going to work. And I said, okay, I'm going to do certain and uncertain. And we started doing certain and uncertain. And then they put a sticky down and I'd say, wow, why did you put that there? And they said, well, I'm certain. I was like, well, how are you certain? And they would say, well, I just know. And I was like, okay, this is not going well for me. And so eventually what I ended up doing is I said, okay, let's get to have evidence and no evidence. And it took Alex, it took some convincing from him for me to actually add this, because I thought it was interesting. I convinced him to use a 2x2, and then he convinced me to use different labels. So I guess it kind of evened out. And with the labels, once we did have evidence and no evidence, when an executive or somebody would put that sticky down, we would say, oh, why would you put that there? And they would say, well, I just know. And I was like, well, do you have any evidence to support that? Because it's all about evidence. quantitative or qualitative, any observable evidence? And I would say, well, no, I don't have any evidence. And so that helped kind of soften it up a little bit and get to a conversation where we were trying to get people to, okay, what are the most important things that you have the least amount of evidence about, that if proven wrong, you fail in a big way, not in a small way. And so basically, that's the flow that we've decided to roll with. And so from there, we would do, okay, here's 44 different experiments, which we have in the book, which help you essentially match your experiment back to your risk. And so I thought that was a really interesting kind of contribution to the community, was, can we put something out there based on the needs we see in teams, almost like jobs to be done in a way, like what's the job to be done for a book, and we were trying to help people match experiments to the kinds of risk they have so they can make progress. And so basically, we applied a taxonomy here. The taxonomy is, it was pretty ambitious. We have cost, which is, how much do these experiments cost? So we categorize each one by cost. We also have setup time and runtime, which also helps let you know, how long does it take to set up, and then how long does it take to run? Because sometimes these are really quick to set up, but then they take a while to run, or they take a long time to set up, vice versa. We also included evidence strength, which means, based on what people say versus what they do. And then we included the themes of desirability, viability, and feasibility. So, and we'll do an exercise on this in a few. But basically, we try to categorize these. And so we said, look, building on Steve Blank's work with 4 Steps to Epiphany, who was sort of the influence. So Eric Ries, who wrote Lean Startup, was in Steve's class, and that became kind of the genesis of Lean Startup. He had customer discovery and customer validation, which I liked, but I felt like we were going beyond just customer here. We were going into backstage and a bunch of other things. And so essentially we have, discovery experiments, which we've categorized these out so you can choose from, hey, I'm just starting out. What kind of experiments can I choose to have like open-ended directional evidence that I'm on the right path at all? So interviews are in there and surveys, but there are many, many other things in there that can help you sort of find your own way. And then we have validation experiments, which are more sort of stronger strength of evidence. And I tried to write a book without using the term MVP. I was not successful. I wasn't successful because there were specific types that I saw teams use that were actually very helpful. One was concierge. So a concierge is like you manually delivering the value without building any software. So it's almost like a white glove service. And I've seen teams use this to help inform their solution design, because they did it manually. They realized what worked and what didn't work, and that helped inform their automation if they wanted to automate anything. The other was Wizard of Oz, which is like concierge, except it's not obvious a person's involved. So some of the solutions I work with, it looks like it's an algorithm. I would anytime you see a bot or an algorithm now, I would question whether or not it's really people behind the scenes anymore, because there's so many teams out there that do this stuff manually, and then you're like, wow, that algorithm is really good. And it was just like a team of 10 people doing it. So just be mindful of how that looks. And then single feature MVP was another one. And so that's like early days Foursquare or Hotel Tonight, where it's like, I need to check in, or I just landed back when we used to fly, and I don't have a hotel, and I need to find a hotel tonight. I press a button, it's only showing me hotels from tonight. And then mashup MVP, which is, I would say the no code movement has kind of absorbed this one, which is I can wire Airtable and Unbounce and another script together, and it actually delivers value to a customer without me having to code anything. And so when I talk about this term MVP, and it goes back before Eric Ries in the book, If you look at early framings, it's usually about risk. I just try to make it a more productive conversation, which is what are the team, like when I'm working with teams, what do they use? They typically use these kinds. They use a concierge, they use Wizard of Oz, they'll use single feature, or they'll use mashup. And those are the ones I really see, rather than just kind of arguing about like what it means over and over again in a conference room somewhere. So that's not as productive. So I thought I would just kind of sketch out a couple for you. So one of the things I end up doing with teams is it's kind of acquisition testing. And so pulling from, Steve Blank's kind of early evangelist model, one of these things I find time and time again is working with a team, if you don't already have an access, like a channel to your customer that you're trying to deliver value to, it can be hard to find them. And so when we're defining them, we say, okay, do they have the problem? So that's kind of table stakes, right? Are they aware they have the problem? So some of you probably have a friend who has a problem and isn't aware. Doesn't mean you give up on your friend, but there are certain ways to approach that. And then are they seeking a solution to the problem? And so what I've noticed when working with teams is there's usually a break, like right through here, where we'll be trying to address people who have a problem and are aware. And sometimes the methods we use are different. And so here, so I was working with mouth pain, a team working on mouth pain product. And here we thought, okay, well, people have mouth pain. So they obviously have the problem. They know, they're aware they have mouth pain, because mouth pain is, usually pretty intense. And so we're just going to try to push, ads. So like Facebook and Twitter ads. And it was a terrible approach. We had a 1% conversion on our page, which had a sign up for the solution for pain. And it was because we were just trying to push stuff in front of people. Before we gave up, which the team was ready to, we said, look, is there a way we could pull them in when they're seeking a solution? So if you were seeking a solution to mouth pain, you should probably go to your dentist, right? Or use some kind of teledentistry app. But you probably go online, and even though we probably shouldn't do this, Google search is a great place to see, do people have, is there any observable evidence of somebody searching for a solution? And so basically what we did is we ran the same ad, but we did Google search only ads. That means they were typing in, mouth pain into this box, and we saw that there was a big search trend, like search volume for it. And when we served up the same ad and the same landing page, we had a 40% conversion. Okay, so that's 1% versus 40%. And I think these are the types of things we need to start treating as experiments. It's not, we know who our customer is, we're just going to hand this off to the marketing department and then they're going to find them. Most marketing departments I work with, the big companies, they're very nervous about that endeavor. They like marketing to known people where they can get like predictable ROI or predictable click-through rates. And so a lot of this stuff, especially if it's new, if you're working with the Agile team, it's like, how do we actually find those people? Well, let's start treating it as an experiment and then go from there. And I love this model, this kind of aware, have the problem aware and then seeking a solution. You can say, okay, we're going to probably use different approaches. And then is there any observable evidence on the people we're solving for? Where are they on the spectrum? Because they're not all in the same spot. One more really quickly is concierge. And so I kind of mentioned this one before, where you do completely white glove service and solve the problem. One of the reasons I like this one is evidence strength. And so it's very high. And it's high because you are delivering it to the customer. They are probably paying for it. And then you're finding out behind the scenes what's it cost to actually do it, at least manually anyway. And I love it because it has all three themes. You can test backstage, can you do this? So kind of like back there, right? You can test, will they pay? And you can also get feedback from them on what are they satisfied? And so it helps you sort of work through everything. Usually the pushback I get on this one is that we don't have time. And it's pretty interesting, that conversation, because it's like, we don't have time to do this, but we have time to build something and scale it without maybe even knowing anybody wants it. We have time for that, but we don't have time to manually go through the process, and this doesn't scale, and it's okay that it doesn't scale, because you want to find out, is there any fit whatsoever before you try to build something that's scalable. So let's see if I can get, I don't know, I can't get rid of that. Okay, so what I want to show with you is the link to the board. So let me jump in chat here. And there we go. All right, so what I've done, and my publisher hasn't killed me yet, so this is good, is I included a cheat sheet for all the experiments in the book here as PDFs. Okay, so if you click on that link, by the way, you don't have to create an account. You can just join as visitor. You'll be like a visiting animal like we have here at the bottom. So what I've done is I've zoomed in and created a bunch of experiment cards for you. And so in here, let's go feature stub. That might be one that you might look at. So feature stub is, it's basically like Google does this all the time, where you click on something in the app or in the website, and it comes up and says, oh, we're not quite ready yet. How likely would you be to use this, and some light feedback. They're just testing ideas and features, and they don't run them for very long. I get routed to them every once in a while, but it's actually really hard to get routed into them. And then they use it as like anecdotal evidence on whether or not they're on the right track. But if you notice, what I've included here is, in these PDFs, you see the cost, the evidence strength, the setup time, and the runtime, and an overall just like summary of it. The book has much more detail, but here I just wanted to give you something as a reference point. So all of these are categorized as discovery. So on here is like you're first starting out, and then validation, which is on the right, which is more like we're further down the road. And so what I thought would be fun with this crowd, especially because you're all like Agile experts here, is what, is there a series of experiments that you think would help you maybe find out if you're on the right track? Okay, so I'll do one, and then we can kind of run from there. So I'm trying to think what would be fun for the Agile community, what I've used at other places. All right, let's do it this way. So I'm just going to kind of do this on the fly. All right, so no judgments here. I'm going to say I want to do AI for retrospectives. And this might already exist, who knows? Like every time I come up with one of these, or I get pitched on one of these, someone usually is like, oh yeah, there's another company working on that. It's okay. Whatever you come up with, there's probably someone else on it. All right, so let's try AI for retrospectives. Now, if I just came up with that idea today, and to create a sticky in Mural, all you do is double click, and it creates a sticky you can type into. I would probably start with customer interviews. And I know that's kind of cliche, but I would want to know, hey, what was like, are there any problems with retrospectives at all? Like if you did them across, 50 teams over this course of, many quarters, are there any challenges with that? Looking at patterns, looking at behavior. I'd want to just talk to people first. I don't think I would jump to building right away in something like that. It would be too risky. And then from there, I might do something like a paper prototype to start like sketching out, like even at a wireframe level of, hey, this is how like AI for retrospectives could work. Okay. From there, I might do something like just a basic simple landing page to describe what I'm offering. So something like, hey, maybe even with an explainer video, right? I could use that as a experiment as well. So I might actually do that before. So I might do something like explainer video that explains how AI could help for retrospectives, and then a landing page maybe describing it in a little more detail with the value prop. I would probably use a lot of the quotes from my customer interviews in the page. That's way it's like true voice of the customer, and it's not me just rambling on about tech that they might not understand. And then I might do something like actually, I might do a Wizard of Oz here type experiment where I try to kind of like fake my way through. Can I sort through retrospective feedback and find patterns and apply some kind of algorithm to it to help give insights into maybe program managers? So let's go with that for program managers. So basically, what I would do as a sequence here, I would start off and say, okay, I'm going to do some customer interviews, find out what I've learned from those. I'm going to use that to kind of sketch out what it could look like. From there, I might do a higher fidelity explainer video that explains what it could do. I could put that in a bigger page that I don't have to launch and drive ads to or anything. I just use it to show to people that I want to test with. And then when people, if I get some people to sign up, I would do something like a Wizard of Oz and look through, hundreds of different retrospective findings, and then use that to sort of inform, do they find value in the output before I ever went and started creating some kind of scalable solution to it. Okay. So overall, I'm just looking for something that would give me evidence that I'm on the right track. Okay. So what I wanted to do with you all, if you're up for it, is to make this a little more interactive, since you're all in here if you click the link. And what I want you to do is we're going to spend let's do 5 minutes on this. So I'll put a timer up here at the top, 5 minutes to just think about something you're working on. And what would that a sequence be? And you can just use stickies here at the bottom, whatever you like. And if you're open to it, I'd love for you to share out after we're done, like basically if you can, what your sequence is and why you think it might help. Okay. Um, okay, so I'm going to set the timer here for 5 minutes. And down at the bottom, just a sequence on something you're working about. Just sketch it out, and then we can share it out in 5 minutes if you're willing to. All right. Okay. And go. have about 1 minute left.
Nice music.
5 minutes is a long time without music, so thank you. All right, try to finish up. All right. I love that their facilitation bell sounds like seatbelt sign or seatbelt sign alarm. Anyway, okay, so I saw a couple down here. Who would like to share what they came up with the larger group?
Yeah, I guess for me, I will start with something what we used to have.
Okay.
I guess I'm missing one sticky note here.
Oh, what was the sticky note you had there?
Yeah, basically, this is a strategy we used to have all the time, so that's nothing really new for me. I used to work for a telco company, or the whole life I work for telco companies, and basically lately we were focusing on one exact segment of the market, so not offering everything for everyone. And every time we were launching new product, it was first we were doing some kind of analysis from where are the people landing on our page. Then we started a simple sales page, but it was like really simple, nothing major, just to see if people are willing to click on it, if they're interested at all. Then we started, okay, then there was a split test. So we were checking like if the people are behaving like we expect that they are, because it's nice that you see numbers, but you just need to see the A/B numbers if it is really happening as it should be. And once the people were interested and the numbers were like we were expecting, or sometimes even better, then we started with a big online campaign, and we started to sell it. But this
That's
is
super interesting.
but this was for us a typical strategy. Only thing is that the simple sales page, that one could be anything what you can imagine. That one was really varying depending on the step one on the traffic analysis. So if we saw that there are young people coming based on from Facebook, then the simple sales page was slightly more fancy and was slightly more focused that direction. If we saw that there are more older people which are just searching for a simple solution, again the wording was different. The page and the style, that was always the same, but just like you focus on a different group, and then you need to prove with the split test that what you did with the previous steps is really hitting the targets.
I love this. This is a little more advanced. You're looking for patterns of behavior in your visitors, and then looking for a pattern, and then quickly spinning up a page tailored to them, and then testing it, and then scaling it. I mean, did you literally uncover new product offerings that way?
No, okay. The whole company, I shouldn't say the name, was a
That's fine.
relatively tiny company, like 24 internal employees and next to it million customers. And to achieve million customers with 24 employees, this was like one of the ways where the marketing was willing to try new things. And there were new things and new things and new things. And once I was doing the ISO auditing to figure out which tools we have and which usernames we have and which contains personal data, then it became like how huge the testing part was.
Very interesting.
And
Thank you for sharing.
just to answer your question, we were selling in total 5 products.
That's cool. No, I love the flow. So I mean, again, it doesn't mean you always go to the next step, right? So if your page isn't really performing, I imagine you probably killed some of those
Yep,
or split test. It didn't always meant that you just marched through these steps to an ad, right? It was let's keep iterating through here. It is really really interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
it was the reason why we had so many tools, because every tool was tested, and if it succeeded, then it was used. But if it didn't, we already paid for it, so we kept it.
That's awesome. All right, cool. You keep me on time here. I don't know. I sometimes I go over. Do we want to have one more share out? Does anyone else have one more they want to share?
Yeah, I'm happy to share, David. I'm on the right-hand side, the self-paced online classes. If you
Yes.
move, yes, so this one. So at the like 3-4 months ago, we decided we made a switch from in-person classes to live online classes, and they work surprisingly well. So why not move to fully self-paced online classes? But there was, of course, an assumption that we had that those would work as well. So we started with customer interviews with some of our larger clients, where we do a lot of classes, whether they would be open to this and which part of our classes or which aspect do they value the most. Then we said, okay, it's worth trying this. So we created an explainer video and created a simple landing page. And we started pre-selling the classes without having any class already built, because that's the most difficult and most expensive or timely expensive piece of it. So yeah, we already sold some of those classes around 2025, I think. Plus, those sales helped us to prioritize which classes to build first, because we offer 3 types of classes: Scrum Masters, Product Owners, and Agile Leaders. And based on the pre-sales, we now know which one to start building first before moving to the next and moving to the next, so that we can also deliver the value to our customers incrementally and iteratively.
Very cool. And so your intent here is, look, you really want to move to self-paced online, and how do you prioritize? Well, you could card sort and do stuff by yourself, but you really don't know. There's no external evidence there, and you're
Exactly.
using real evidence to see. But the intent is always, look, you want to go down this path. It's just how do you prioritize and how do you make it work, and then what's the evidence you can get from customers to know you're on the right path. So I
Exactly.
like the approach.
Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
meanwhile, we also tested pricing and a lot of other things, but the most important thing was, are we going to sell any of those classes? So that was the assumption, and whether that would be valuable to our customers.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I think you all are right on. Basically, my intent here isn't to say have like a 20 experiment waterfall sequence and go execute. That is not what my intent is here. It's more of, you're already using Agile, we're already iterative. Can we start thinking through how do we really mature our discovery process? And I feel like over the last maybe 10 or 20 years, Agile is extremely well at delivery, right? We get delivery really well. But if you're still delivering something nobody cares about, then you're ultimately going to fail anyway, whether you use Agile or not. And so I think just bringing that awesome, like those principles you already adhere to and believe in into your discovery work, I think makes a lot of sense. And so you'll notice in the book, there's a lot of, Kanban like things, there's some XP things, there's a lot of Agile influence in there. So there's some Scrum influence in there with the ceremonies. And so I've basically just been pulling a lot of that um, into discovery work to make it more repeatable. And so essentially that's what I wanted to share with you all today. We covered quite a lot. I did a lot of sketching, and we ended up doing quite a lot today. So let's maybe take some questions, if you have any, some questions that maybe I didn't get to during the little workshop we just did.
Yes. So feel free to post your questions. Meanwhile, I'll start with a question until we get some from the audience. And David, yeah, you can keep your mural on, because probably you're going to use this to explain a few things. Now, you started working on this because I assume you had a lot of organizations build stuff that was not really used, right? Do you have like a best of list of some of the products that weren't either viable or feasible or desirable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to call out companies, but some of the things I worked on, it, they ended up either no one cared or they ended up in really different markets. So, for example, I was working on an initiative where we were doing it was a B2B play, which was essentially like Harry Potter, where you look at the movie Harry Potter, you look at the paintings and they move. There's actually a term for that. It's called cinemagraphs. And before Apple started doing a lot of this on photos, it was a strategy I was pursuing with the team, and we thought, oh, B2B people will love this. Like we're going to go test. People are going to want to use these on their Pinterest and Shopify and all this stuff to drive traffic to generate sales. We were flooded with people wanting to animate their cats and dogs. That's all people wanted to use it for. We had like a landing page wired to a Trello board where our requests would get spun up as a Trello board, and our designers were literally like animating these things. And we're like, what's with all the cats and dogs? And everyone was like, can you make my cat sparkle? Can you make my dog? And so there was a need, but there was no way that the company I was working with was going to pursue that. They're like, no, we don't care about B2C. This is like something like Snapchat would do or something. Like we're not going to go do this. And so a lot of that happens where I'll test something. Like one of the things I've publicly written about was Toyota and testing a lot of their automated wireless gas payment solutions. And ultimately, a lot of them got shelved because, here in the States anyway, when you pull up to a gas pump or a petrol station, you still have to get out to pump the gas. It's all self-serve. And so anything we were doing automated to make it really slick, it inevitably flopped because people thought, well, that's cool, I might do it once. But you don't spend hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure and integrating tech into cars to have people use it once. But like, funny enough, I just saw a commercial with Amazon and Exxon where they're really doing the same thing. It's like, Alexa, pay for my gas. And I'm like, okay, maybe it'll work for you all. But again, how cool is saying Alexa, pay for my gas when you still have to get out and pump the gas? So there's just some weird dynamics. And I have to say, there's a lot of things that we've killed. And what we try to say when we do that is, look at all the money we saved you. You didn't spend tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars on something and then find out it didn't work. We're trying to help you make better investment decisions. So quite often, a lot of the things I work on never really see the light of day because after we go through this like rigorous testing, we realize, this isn't really worth investing in, or at least not now. And maybe we put it on the shelf, and then we kind of, nobody gets fired, nobody gets a black mark on their career. It's okay, let's go find a new idea to go test.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you just had a wrong assumption, right? And you can't fire someone for having a wrong assumption on something, as long as you rigorously test. So this leads me to the question that Martin just posted in the Zoom chat. Are companies willing to invest into this kind of testing before failing on their own? And I think, Martin, you're probably referring to a bit like larger companies, not startups, because startups very intuitively do this, at least many of them. But David, like larger corporations that you work with, how much awareness do you need to create in them before they're willing to go down this path?
Well, I think a lot of them have already invested in things that didn't work out. And then when they do their, I would say a retrospective, but it kind of turns into a postmortem in a way. It's always, well, we didn't spend enough time with the customer and the problem. Because the companies I work with, unless it's time travel, they can literally build anything. Like the build part isn't the risky part usually anymore. It's do you have a viable model? Do you have a really a customer need? And so while I'd like to say customers would pull me in to sort of mitigate this, I think quite often I'm pulled in either to something that it's already flopped and now they're trying to rebuild it. So some of the even products you see in shelves in retail stores that I've worked on started off as a different form of that product and flopped. And then we unpacked it and went to the core value prop again and tested it in a different way. So I would like to see more companies. I had a CEO, or no, it wasn't CEO. It was a vice president say, like, I want to test 1,000 ideas over the next 5 years, and 99% of them will fail. I don't hear many say that though. So it's amazing that some even say that in front of me. That's great. But we need more of that. We need more of that thinking of, look, if you look at even VCs, right? VCs are investing on a like 10-year horizon, and they're investing across 150 different ideas. I work with VCs out here in Silicon Valley, and they said, look, if you're going to start investing, don't write one check, write like 40. It's not worth writing just one check. And I look at innovation labs and corporations, they're testing like 3 different ideas. I was like, there's zero chance one of these is going to work, and so if you only have 3 ideas to test, you need to understand you're going to have to test 40 or 50 or 100 of those ideas. And so I think we're getting there, but it's slow. It's definitely slow, and I'm usually brought in after some sort of failure where they spent tens of millions or hundreds of millions on something that didn't work out. I wish they'd pull me in sooner, but sometimes you have to learn the hard way, and then they come around to, hey, maybe we should start iteratively testing things a little better.
And probably after those failures, they also value the input that you give a bit more. So the large corporations, many of them are in the B2B space. And Petra is asking, do you have any special recommendations for testing in B2B area? Or would that be any different from testing in the B2C area?
Well, the good news is the B2B area is being heavily influenced by B2C. And so a lot of the really successful companies we've seen disrupt established players in the B2B market, they've really just taken a B2C experience and applied it to B2B. But there are a couple, especially down here, if we look at like some of these facilitated exercises like Product Box and Speedboat, Buy a Feature, Card Sorting, a lot of those tend to work well in B2B, because anytime you talk to anybody in B2B, they'd expect you to be pitching them and trying to sell them something. And so it can actually be hard to do customer interviews because they're just like, well, you're just going to pitch me. So get to the point. And so if you can use facilitated exercises, sometimes you can pull out learning there that you wouldn't get otherwise. And so being able to kind of cognitively move them past, oh, wait, he's not pitching me. We're actually going through an exercise together. And you're trying to really find out what my real problems are. So there are some in here. I don't have necessarily a B2B designation on them, but a lot of these facilitated exercises work real well. And then explainer videos, even though it's not like you post them to YouTube, but you use them with your customers. And so, yeah, there are some things. And luckily, and I work with a lot of B2B companies, and even B2B startups. And, the good news is that B2C is heavily influencing the whole B2B strategy. So, maybe 5-10 years ago, people go, oh, that's only for B2C. It's really hard to say that now, because if you look at really successful B2B companies, they look like B2C, except they're, targeting other businesses. So yeah, I've had some success. I would just say the biggest hurdle is always, they just expect you to be pitching them something. So anything you can do to get beyond that framing earlier is beneficial to you.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So David, as a final question, you didn't want to call out bad examples. Do you have a favorite good example where a company rigorously tested their way to success?
Ooh, that's a really hard question. I didn't expect that one. Thank you. That one kind of caught me off guard. There's a reason I mentioned Adobe early on. I just think they're doing a really great job of sticking with this and testing out things. Like if you look at what Adobe has done, they have gone from, I literally take a DVD or CD and put it in my computer, to completely cloud-based business model, and they're doing super well. And if you look at the new mobile apps they've created, they're getting like 4 or 5 star reviews on the App Store, and some of them are winning awards. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think what they're doing is, and just based on my overall involvement, is they're testing stuff to see, is there a need here first? And sometimes it's not even with the Adobe logo. And they're just saying, I just want to see if this has legs at all. And then once it gets traction, they can like apply the brand to it and scale it and make it successful that way. And if it doesn't, they just kill it off and say, well, nobody cared. And I think more corporations should try to do that, whether it's a labs brand. I see a lot of companies on Indiegogo anymore. I probably have a list of 50 different Indiegogo campaigns that are corporations running crowdfunding experiments. It's amazing. And so I do think corporations are slowly coming around and be willing to test stuff in ways that are kind of lightly branded or labs branded or off branded, to see, does anybody care about this other than that we're doing it? Because if they're only coming to it because it's got our logo on it, that's probably not good enough anymore. So I really love what they're doing, and I think it pays off. If you look at any of their new mobile apps, you can say like, oh, okay, this looks different, and it's different because they're experimenting their way through it. So I'd say they're one of my favorite examples right now.
Yeah, I like that one. I personally like Tesla a lot because they also do a lot of testing on various aspects, like starting with the Lotus Elise chassis and the experiment they did with the Model 3 pre-sale and so on and so forth. So we see a lot of those companies in that space, but not only like software, but also pure hardware players running a lot of a lot of those experiments. So David, thank you again very much. Some people have been asking what's the name of the book. It's Testing Business Ideas, highly recommended. Thanks, David, for joining us from Sacramento.
Yeah, thanks for having me.